Okay. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Hello, Doug. I am wonderful. The sun is shining today, and that's always good for your spirits.
I agree. No argument from me there. Um, I think you better just tell us what it is you do because I read through your bio and you write a Poor Will's Almanac, but I think we need more of a description than that. Why don't you just tell us what you're all about?
Well, I started almanac writing back in the 80s after I quit smoking and started wandering in the woods and seeing what was blooming and what the birds were doing and so forth. And before then, I had been obsessively tracking the weather for a number of years. My wife had given me a barometer for my birthday, and I started graphing the weather up and down. And then when I quit smoking and started adding more information to my graphs, I ended up with all kinds of notes, and I started putting them together into an almanac. And I went to the local newspaper, the weekly paper, and I said, I'd like to do an almanac. And they said, okay, um, you can do one, but if you do one, you got to do more. You got to do them every week. That was in February of 1984, and I'm still doing them. So the almanac that I write combines seasonal notes from my wanderings, as well as standard astronomical information about the position of the moon and the sun and the stars. And I have a section of my farm almanacs that include farming and gardening information and tips. My 2021 almanac has an S.A.D index, a seasonal affective disorder index that uh, tells you in numerical terms how you're going to be feeling today. Um, and so my almanac in some ways is a very eclectic combination of things, and it morphs into different formats depending on how I do it. For example, I have a podcast almanac that appears weekly or that's broadcast weekly on WYSO in Yellow Springs, Ohio. That's an NPR station. And with that almanac, I talk about my feelings about the seasons. And it's kind of a meditative reflection on what's happening in nature. I do an almanac for Countryside and Small Stock Journal, which is a an entertainment almanac. It has some puzzles in it and so forth, but it also has a calendar of homesteading tips for each day of the year.
Okay.
So you know, um, I do a lot of things. In other words,
I've heard of the Farmer's Almanac. And exactly what does it do to help farmers? I mean, what information is in there that's going to help farmers grow better crops?
well, historically, the Old Farmer's Almanac has been a part of American life in American publications for decades and decades. That was the first almanac I ever saw, and I'm 80 years old. Um, Now, does it help farmers? No. Uh, it has an annual winter forecast. It has weather forecasts that are as good as the government's. Um, Sometimes they contradict the U.S. government, but they're complementary. Um, Now, Poor Will's Almanac, I have a different system for weather. I have charted the passage of cold fronts or high pressure systems across the United States for the past 45 years. And I have found that with my weather charts and so forth, that these fronts occur more or less at the same time each year. Now, not the exact date, but very close to it. So, for example, here in the Midwest, where I am, the cold front of November 18th is right on schedule with a very, very high barometric pressure today. And as that moves on, things will warm up a little bit. These patterns are generally true for most of the United States. Of course, the weather that you would get in Oregon as the pressure system approaches the United States is going to be different from what it is at the Mississippi Valley or in New York City. But the patterns remain, and they're fairly predictable. And my almanac gives you a list of all those for the whole year. Now, does that help farmers? I've been told, I've had farmers from Wyoming to Iowa tell me that they depend on my predictions. Now, you know, we've got our weather apps and satellite weather too that are really very good within 7 to 10 days. But after that, almanac weather can be useful.
All right. You mentioned the moon at some point in this conversation.
Right.
How does the phases of the moon affect crops? I never understood that.
Well, there's a lot of lore involved with planting by the moon and so forth. And I don't know, all of the information that's available on planting by the moon is mostly anecdotal. There are some studies that say that seeds sprout better at the new moon, and that would be the time to plant. That's going to depend on so many different things. I use the moon mostly for weather. For example, the weather that we've been having, well, at least in the eastern half of the country, the past 3 or 4 days is a result, I think, of not only the high pressure systems that are passing through the country at this time, but also the new moon at perigee. And perigee is the position of the moon when it's closest to the Earth, and that varies from week to week. But when you get new moon or full moon at perigee, you get more severe weather. And I think it's curious to note that the November 3rd hurricane that hit Florida and the hurricane that's pummeling Central America right now, they're both connected to the lunar cycles. Hurricane Iota is coming into Central America exactly at just a day or so after the new moon, and the hurricane that hit Florida, Hurricane Eta, came in after full moon. So I think there's a relationship that most meteorologists don't stress.
So how long does it take you to compile your almanac?
Well, I'm working on it all the time. I make daily notes about what's going on, and I have a day book that I keep with all kinds of information. It's almost 1,000,000 words, and I use that as a reference. So I have all of the weather information put together. It's available, in fact, online. You can buy the weather book of Poor Will's Almanac is available on Amazon or my website, and so I have all of that information on hand. And what I do is I um, each week, or depending on whether I'm doing a weekly or a monthly or my annual almanac, I look at these things and I put that together with where the moon is at any particular week or whatever the period that I'm writing for. I combine the data that I have with current situation with the moon and other factors too.
Okay. So yeah, a lot of that would be available online. You said you had mentioned something about going out into nature or going
Right.
out into the woods or something. What are you doing out there? What are you looking for out in the woods?
Well, I enjoy keeping track of what happens when, and that's a simplistic way of defining phenology. And phenology tracks the uh, the times that events in nature occur. So, for example, when I go out into the woods in the springtime, I'm looking for when certain flowers bloom. And my Poor Will's Almanac for 2021 has an entire listing of the most common trees and plants and when they bloom in an average year. So I've put together that document through the years, and uh, that's useful for most people in at least the eastern half of the country. Uh, that you can, and most of the plains area too. Um, so you can put that together with what you see and um, figure out when things are going to happen. If you're a gardener, um, then when things bloom makes a big difference. Uh,
Okay.
you know,
So how many of these almanacs have you done now?
I've been doing weekly almanacs since 1984.
Oh,
Uh,
long time. Okay.
so yeah, I mean, I've written a lot of columns, and I've done monthly almanacs. I used to write. I think I'm the longest running sheep almanac writer in history. I I, uh, I wrote for Sheep Magazine and did their monthly almanacs starting in 1995, and they just went out of business this last year. So I've stopped writing sheep almanacs, but I've done monthly almanacs since '06, and I've done podcasts and radio shows for NPR, WYSO in Yellow Springs since 2006. So,
Okay.
um,
I got to ask real quick, and then we sort of have to wrap it up. What information is in the sheep almanac?
well, that's a long story.
Oh,
The
well, can you make it like in a minute? Give us a quick overview of it.
Okay, it will tell you if you're a sheep farmer.
Yeah.
Uh, the sheep almanac that I that I wrote for many years tells you when to 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 take care of your sheep. When do you give them? When do you get ready to breed them? What shots do you give them?
Oh, I
When
see.
do you
Okay.
shear them, and so forth.
Oh, all
So
right.
well, it's down to earth
Well,
information.
that, you know, the old saying about you learn something new every day. I never knew that there was a sheep almanac.
Well,
So I'm glad to know that, actually. That's good information.
Well, you can't get them anymore, but because
Oh,
they stopped publishing. But um, you know, I can give you all the information you need if you need to raise some sheep.
well, if I decide to raise sheep, you're going to be the first one I call. That's absolutely true. Bill, we do have to wrap this up. Thank you for coming on. Do you have a website that you want to give out or something people
Sure,
can take a look at?
it's poorwillsalmanac.com, and it's almanac with a K. So poorwillsalmanac.com. and be sure to put a K on the almanac, and you'll get there.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on. This was very informative. I learned a few things today. I
Okay,
appreciate that.
Douglas.